Hello everyone, this seminar presentation today is about the social injustices associated with cultural indifference in the westernised classroom. It has been titled Celebrating Difference in the 21st Century Classroom because I aim to focus on a positive approach to embrace difference and deal with the inequities associated with it. As I unpack the implications of this social justice issue, I will provide you with a real classroom scenario that presented this very issue of social injustice. So what is social justice? Social justice plays a significant role in the relationships and learning that takes place in the classroom. When social injustice occurs, there are several likely visible consequences, such as poor student relationships, poor student-teacher relationships, and significantly lower learning outcomes for the affected students. Rawle of 1971 identifies that social injustice is basically the inequality and inequity of social minority groups. As education reforms shift towards a political focus on neoliberalism, bilingual and multicultural approaches to teaching have been pushed aside. With increases in standardized testing, we as teachers need to recognize how these conditions directly impact on our culturally diverse students, where they are at risk of being disadvantaged. Sleater 2010 argues that this issue is influenced by the white fear of losing national and global hegemony. Providing you now with a real-world example, in a foundation classroom of predominantly Anglo-Saxon students, there are two children of first-generation Chinese descent. Based on my observations, I've come to feel that a number of students do not include or show interest in listening to these students' views or opinions. As a result of this, the Chinese students have been less engaged in learning and are reluctant to participate in group discussions and tasks. Based on research conducted by MetLife Survey of 2005, Gomez of 2007, and Pereira and Ornelas of 2011, they recognise that low recognition and acceptance of cultural difference impacts on students, where they will exhibit disengagement, low participation levels, and feel disrespected and judged by what the media portrays rather than the personal relationships and extended conversations. These identified problems reveal two key elements of concern: that my teaching is potentially culturally irrelevant to these students, and the learning environment comprising of collective attitudes and values is not supportive of tolerance and acceptance of cultural difference. This relates to the Australian Professional Teaching Standards, which will be addressed in greater depth further on. These elements impact on my ability to teach effectively, because the focused students are not engaged or involved with learning at an adequate level. Therefore, my teaching practice needs to be adjusted to support an environment of equity and equality. I will now provide you with an explicit understanding of how this social justice issue links to the Australian Professional Teaching Standards. In relation to Standards 1.1 and 1.5, I should be demonstrating that I can support culturally diverse students with a repertoire of strategies that support individual strengths and needs. I will differentiate learning and ways of engaging students relevant to their cultural backgrounds. Looking at Standards 4.1 and 4.4, I endeavour to create and maintain a supportive classroom environment tailored to individual learning needs. By employing a range of inclusive strategies, I will support the full participation and well-being of culturally diverse students within curriculum and legal requirements. Looking at Standards 6.1 and 6.2, I can use my evolving knowledge of strategies to continually refine and deepen my knowledge and practice to better support culturally diverse students. This can be achieved by using both the Australian Professional Standards as a reflection tool and a range of appropriate sources for professional learning. In Standards 7.1 and 7.2, I will meet and apply all of the codes of ethical conduct and responsibilities as an educator and further comply with the legislative and organisational requirements that inform how I will develop appropriate learning support and interventions to create a socially just and culturally inclusive classroom. Deva, Sorensen and Broderick of 2005 agree that this issue is pertinent to social justice in today's classrooms, because without acceptance and tolerance of cultural difference, it will not only marginalise and limit learning for minority cultural groups, but also limit the by and large culture's possibilities of learning and broadening their own cultural and social perspectives. Conducting an action research cycle on this issue is imperative as it helps to identify the problem and engage with highly relevant literature to deliver appropriate support measures and intervention in response to the problem. Therefore, the stimulus question I've designed to frame my action research is: how does my teaching practice support acceptance and tolerance of cultural groups? I will now present to you a review of the literature in the research conducted to analyse experts' views on this issue. The Australian curriculum magnifies the importance of cultural recognition by integrating the intercultural understanding as a strand of the general capabilities. The Melbourne Declaration on Educational Goals for Young Australians is embedded within the foundations of the Australian curriculum, and this further recognises the fundamental role that education plays in building a society that is cohesive and culturally diverse and values Australia's Indigenous cultures. Upon researching the diverse languages that make up our multifaceted society, the 2011 census reveals that the top 5 languages other than English include Mandarin, Italian, Arabic, Cantonese and Greek. Did you know that 25% of Australia's population were born overseas? With such a large number of immigrants in our population, you would think that difference would be something that would be largely accepted. However, according to a study conducted by Coender, Lubber and Scheepers in 2003, the Western majority's perspectives on immigrants was more than discouraging. The study revealed that a large percentage of the population resisted immigrants, and others even perceived immigrants as a collective threat to their way of life. This is illustrated in the table here, where we see 50% support resistance to immigrants, and 58% support the notion that immigrants hold a collective threat against their way of life. These figures are more than concerning, particularly when we as teachers are aware of the fact that our children's attitudes are directly impacted by their parents' attitudes and dispositions to ways of living. Calancis and Cope provide us with a way forward where they recognise that intercultural understanding will provide children with the interpersonal capacity to look beyond their own culture by engaging with others and ultimately recognising how we are influenced by the values and ideologies imposed by our society. Adding to the surmounting research that supports culturally inclusive teaching practices as the best approach to teaching, Banks 2008 argues that citizenship education should be reformed so that it reflects the home cultures and languages of students from diverse groups. And he contends that group rights can help individuals to attain structural equality. Deva, Sorensen and Broderick, 2005, as well as Williams, Shealy and Callens of 2007, are advocates of recognition and acceptance of cultural difference. Collectively, these researchers strongly support that a culturally inclusive classroom environment can be achieved through culturally relevant and authentic literacy programs. They quote that literacy provides a way to develop feeling vocabulary through talking and writing about social justice issues in context. This plan has been designed to be implemented at the classroom level and conducted over the course of 8 weeks or 1 term. Drawing upon the insights of researchers previously discussed in my literature review, I have designed a literacy investigation which will work to develop students' understanding of culture, identity, and acceptance of difference. Using the classroom scenario presented earlier, this plan has been devised to address the issue of cultural indifference. This plan, as endorsed by Calancis and Cope 2005, will draw upon the multiliteracy's pedagogical framework. This involves situated practice, overt instruction, critical framing, and transformed practice. Through this scaffolded learning process, students will be guided towards a deeper understanding of cultural indifference. The literacy investigation will utilise a range of purposely selected literature. These picture books and multimodal texts form the basis of the investigation as students discuss the social justice issue of cultural indifference in a safe context that does not confront students' negative personal experiences, as supported by Deva, Sorensen and Broderick. Because this is a foundation classroom, the selected texts include The Lost Thing by Sean Tan, For the Birds, a short film animation, and My Two Blankets by Irina Kobold and Freya Blackwood. These have been selected because they vary in complexity of language suited to this age group and provide a range of text types for students to explore in relevance to the issue of cultural indifference, as supported by Williams, Shealy and Callens of 2007. Effective classroom strategies that will support the implementation of such a unit include facilitating whole class circle discussions, as well as small group discussions and teacher-student discussions. The use of circle discussions physically positions students all in view of each other, whilst also placing them on an equal level. These discussions offer the opportunity for every voice to be heard, which is the ultimate goal here, recognition and acceptance of every voice. The small group discussions, which should be supported by the teacher as well as teacher aides, provide a more intimate space for students to talk and explore the ideas, feelings and values that are presented across the texts. This again supports a culturally inclusive classroom environment, as endorsed by Deva, Sorensen and Broderick. Noting here also that the students whom this action research cycle has been developed are ESL, it is imperative that ESL adjustments are made to the learning that takes place. This could be in the form of translations as well as supportive illustrations that are familiar to the children. Assessment will be carried out to identify student learning and understanding in relevance to both literacy and intercultural understanding. Celebrating difference is the focus of this unit, and this outcome can be demonstrated where students would have the opportunity to create a group poster which addresses acceptance of difference. This aligns with the Australian Curriculum English for Foundation Year students, where they recognise that texts are created by authors who tell stories and share experiences that may be similar or different to students' own experiences, and further allows them the opportunity to create short texts to explore, record and report ideas and events using familiar words and beginning writing knowledge. The task, more importantly, aligns with the intercultural understanding outcomes, where foundation year students will challenge stereotypes and prejudices by identifying examples of the acceptance and inclusion of others in given situations. This form of assessment is backed by Calancis and Cope 2005, as it encourages student collaboration, discussion, and transformation of understanding as they work together to create a text that builds both their sense of belonging and their capacity to move between their own worlds and the worlds of others. In providing evidence of the effectiveness of this plan, the use of professional teacher reflections and observations of student interactions between the two concerned students will reveal the level that the other class members are making an effort to include others. Observations and records of these students' engagement in tasks and participation in group discussions will further reveal the effectiveness of the plan. Evidence of these outcomes could be made in the form of photographs, anecdotal records, and student work samples. Presenting to you now is the critical analysis of my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the plan I have created. Looking at the strengths, students have opportunities to develop depth of understanding of culture and will develop stronger peer relationships. This in turn should support culturally diverse students to develop a sense of belonging and connectedness. This links to the goals of the unit as supported by Dever, Sorensen and Broderick. Looking at the weaknesses now, the plan is conducted over the course of a term. This means that it limits the depths of learning that could potentially take effect over the course of the year. Another significant weakness is the issue that these students are ESL, and despite adjustments made to learning content, these students could still feel indifferent in their language abilities. The opportunities that arise include the opportunity to reach out to other students and inspire a change in attitude towards other cultures that would otherwise be deemed inferior. There is also the opportunity to involve parents and encourage a shift in attitude towards different cultural perspectives. This will hopefully reduce the issues of resistance and fear of immigrants posing threats to westernized ways of living. The threats that come about include the possibility that some students may not respond to the plan, and perhaps attitudes are already too deeply embedded from their home life. Another possible threat that has been identified includes the high demands of the curriculum, where time factors may impose problems as focus on content has become a high priority in recent times. Upon reflection of this action research cycle, I have learned the importance of purposeful professional engagement, specifically highlighting the value of maintaining updated knowledge of theory and practice to better support my students. When social justice issues such as this one arise, it is of utmost importance that I am identifying the problem through accurate data collection and observations, that I'm deepening my understanding of the issue with relevant research and literature, and I formulate a personalised plan of action in response to this. Through this process of conducting an action research cycle, I have learnt how critical the issue of cultural indifference can have upon a classroom, and further, it is our responsibility as teachers to respond to these issues and effect change toward cultural harmony. By engaging in this process, I now feel prepared to respond to social justice issues in an appropriate and effective manner. The structure of the action research cycle was conducive to my way of learning as it categorized the phases into simple steps that made it practical and effective. The plan I have developed is most definitely something I can draw upon and adjust in my beginning years as a teacher. What I enjoy most about the action research cycle is the fact that it is completely personalised and built upon a real classroom. It provides me with the flexibility to source information and create my own intervention programs, rather than trying to implement one strategy over and over. Of course, we all know that one size does not fit all, which is why I am passionate about using the action research cycle as a method to improve my teaching practice and support the complex needs that arise. This raises potentially the most important element in my teaching practice. For me to become an effective teacher and to know my students and support their needs, I must be a reflective practitioner so that my classroom supports a socially just environment.